You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
It's all over at Forsyth Bar Stadium. The Chiefs make it 10 in a row. They continue their unbeaten run in 2023.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the Chiefs recently, and for good reason. 10 from 10 in Super Rugby Pacific. Let's bring in their mental performance coach, mental skills coach, Aaron Walsh. Aaron, great to get the chance to chat to you again on Weekend Sport. The Chiefs really are the hottest team in New Zealand sport right now. 10 wins from 10, playing superbly. What are you seeing from this team day in, day out that is leading to the on-field success at the weekends that we are seeing so vividly?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on, mate. Yeah, I think I listened a little bit to Anton yesterday, and I thought, he sort of summed it up as, it's not just 1 year. And I think that's what people who are in sport understand. We had a really tough period in 2020 and 2021, and those periods either bring a group together and have a bit of resolve to go out and change where we're at, or they can splinter. And the guys have been just magnificent the last, I suppose, 18 months. Going, you know what, we want to change the narrative a little bit here of Chiefs rugby. And I think what we've seen this year is just a credit to sort of the resolve and the commitment they've had and the care that they have for the club to really turn things around.
What has your role been in helping to change that narrative?
Oh, I'm just sort of in the background, mate. I never get on the field. I wish some days. Not really when I see how hard they hit. My role is just to make sure that our mindset is where it needs to be to deliver on a performance. So if we have a game plan or we have things in our environment that we want to accomplish, I think we all are pretty aware now at this stage of the game that how we think and then how we go about our business, how we approach things is going to be a critical part of that. So my job's just sort of to make sure that we're all in tune, we're all rowing in the right direction from a mindset perspective, and then ultimately that the players have the tools in their hands to be able to deliver a performance when they feel pressure.
So how much does your role and your messaging to the players change when things are going so brilliantly well compared to, times when, things were a bit more challenging? How has your messaging changed?
I don't think probably the messaging changes that much, because I think, there are some basic fundamentals that you need to have in place to be able to perform well from a mental perspective. But I think what changes is understanding the context that the message is being delivered in, and there is, in sports there's these quite huge extremes. You've got the ecstasy of a win and the agony of a defeat, and so that certainly forms sort of how you shape your message, because you've got to understand the context in which you're delivering within.
So you're watching a game. I know, I presume a scrum coach can watch a game and say, the scrum's going well. An attack coach can watch a game and go, attack's functioning well. Can you see the outcomes of your work with the players when you're watching a game of rugby?
I think yes and no. I think as you get to know them a little bit more, you do. But, there's no GPS for the mind, which I reckon if someone could invent that, that'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? That actually helps us understand what players are thinking in the moments. But I suppose as you get to know players over the years and you build relationships, you can sort of see, it might be something how they respond to an error, or, it might be collectively, what's the next few actions after we score or concede points. And so I'm probably, looking at those sort of things to get a little bit of a gauge on how we're functioning in that space.
We had, as you mentioned, Anton Lienert-Brown on the show yesterday. I really enjoyed catching up with him, back from injury, bringing up 100 games for the Chiefs. I see you tweeted a bit about him yesterday. How integral a part of the Chiefs is Anton Lienert-Brown?
Oh, massive. I mean, you've got a guy who, which we all love the most about him, and I think the public said this to, a guy that just cares so much about what he does. And so I don't think it would matter what team you put him in, whether you put him in the ABs or whether he's playing for us or even playing for Waikato. He just has such deep care for the people around him, for the club that he represents, and that care is translated into effort. I think it's one thing to say you care. It's another thing to say that care will require sacrifice at some point. And I think what you see with him is his willingness to sacrifice as an expression of how much care he has, for his own performance, for the people around him, and ultimately for the club. He's a top man, absolutely great man.
There's a lot of noise around about a number of Chiefs players right now in terms of All Black selection, and I look at a couple like Damian McKenzie and Sean Stevenson. Damian's been in the All Blacks environment. Of course, Sean has never been. Do you work with players like those two and others on blocking out noise like that and hype, or do you ask them to embrace it? How does that work?
Well, I think you've got to acknowledge it at some point. I think it's healthy to acknowledge it's an aspiration that you want to achieve. And, once you've acknowledged that, I think getting on with the work, there's a phrase that I really, really like. It's the idea is, you keep your eyes on the target, not on the prize. And there always is going to be a prize, but that prize is a result of good performances. So, your focus should be on how do you perform well each week, and then what happens after that is largely outside of your control because there's selectors and other people who have an opinion of that. So I think, the critical thing is what do I need to do every day? How do I get my performance? Do I understand how I perform well? And have I done what I need to do during a week to be able to repeat that week after week? And if that's the focus, then your eyes aren't divided and distracted, and you're able just to get on with the business. But I do think it's also important to everyone has aspirations. Everybody wants to achieve things. So I don't think there's any point hiding behind that. It's embracing that and then going to work.
How much time, Aaron, do you spend working with the other coaches in the group?
We're obviously in the same building and most of the time in the same office. So there's always, I think, organic conversations happening. The brilliant coaching group who, have really fought to be aligned with each other around how we want to play the game and then ultimately how the environment runs. So, those conversations are happening all the time.
And when we spoke to Anton yesterday, he mentioned Quinn Tupaia. I asked him about Quinn, and he talked about, the influence that he's had in the background, even coming back from his own injury. Are you working alongside Quinn in terms of helping him through the mental challenges of a long-term injury?
Yeah, I think, all of us sort of jump in on that work with Quinn, but, Quinn's a pretty resilient young man. And, as we all saw last year, quite a horrific injury that was, had nothing to do with how we was playing or being in the wrong place. It was just a really, really unfortunate incident. So, I think initially he was able to accept that and move on. And I think accepting that and moving on has enabled him just to get on with trying to get himself back on the field. Yeah,
hope to see him back out there soon. Of course, alongside your Chiefs role, we spoke to you, can't remember if it was the back end of last year, but it must have been back end of last year, early this year, about your role with Scotland. You spent time with them during the Six Nations and will again as the year goes on towards the Rugby World Cup. How different was your role there compared to the one you play at the Chiefs?
A little bit different there's probably a couple of factors. One, it's a campaign rather than a season. So, over a season, you have an opportunity to embed certain messages and build throughout the year. But, Six Nations, every match is like a World Cup final to them. It's quite phenomenal how much engagement there is from the Scottish people, how much the fans, and then obviously your average crowd's like 70,000 every time you play. So, number one, at those campaigns, you have to get moving really, really quickly. And then I think, secondly, just it's the international level just brings a whole different lens. That is, they've got a massive focus on them. And I suppose probably what I enjoyed the most is that I was in camp with them for the whole time. So you get to do a lot of work, and after the training in the hotel, you go for a wander, go for a walk, and on off day, go play golf with a few of the lads or some of the coaching staff, and you actually get to build quite deep relationships quite quickly. So, between it being a short campaign and also being in camp, I suppose it's probably a little bit more intense than what it would be like over a season with a club team.
Yeah, and you probably alluded to it there, but going in as a new face and having to pretty quickly, as you say, not across an entire season, but across a campaign of 5 games to build those relationships and presumably build trust as well with those who you're working with. Was that a challenge at all for you?
It's always a challenge, but I'm pretty clear on my sort of philosophy around that is that you have to connect with people first. So that's always the first thing. You connect with people, you get their trust. And once you've got their trust, then I think you're right, mate. You can actually impact them and have influence with them. But, it's a fine line. You can't spend months trying to build relationships and get close and all of that stuff when you're actually there to bring impact as well. So, yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act at times, but you sort of, if you've done it for a while, you sort of learn when the time is to, all right, we need to actually start having some impact. And we've built solid enough relationships. We've got some good trust here. We can sort of just go for things.
Pretty tough poll. Scotland are in at Rugby World Cup, South Africa and Ireland in there. Only 2 can get out. How can you best assist in making that happen? You talked about, focusing on the target, not on the prize. Does that apply here as well?
Oh, massively. The thing about the Rugby World Cup is, in an 80-minute match, anything can happen. And I remember I went to the 2019 Women's World Cup with the football ferns, and we had a warm-up fixture against England in Brighton. It was a magnificent day. We won 1-0 against England, who was, went on to be a pretty successful team. And it was just on the day we had, 20% possession. And so it sort of given me some perspective, those games are played on one day. It's 80 minutes. And anything can happen in the pressure of a World Cup. So it's just preparing the men to be able to cope with that pressure, but not just cope with it, be able to then place that pressure on the teams that we're playing.
And just to circle that back to the Chiefs, again, it is 80 minutes. Anyone can beat anybody, and we've seen teams. I look at the Blues last year, practically an unbeaten season, and then they're not the ones lifting the trophy at the end. It's Razor who's breakdancing again. Do you have to put those messages into the minds of the Chiefs players so that they realise that anything can happen in an 80-minute game?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And we even saw it. I watched a little bit last night of Moana, right? You wouldn't have predicted that in 1,000 years, but this is the nature of high-performance sport at this level. And going back to what I spoke about before, in 2020, I think we lost 5 games in the last 5 minutes by less than 5 points. Those margins are so slim that you can't take anything for granted. And I think also we're really aware we haven't won anything. We haven't lifted a trophy yet. We haven't, it's a good start, but we all know that, the defining moments of the season are yet to come. But hopefully the moments that we've navigated through so far will give us some confidence that we can not just handle those moments, but thrive in those moments as well.
I look forward to seeing how the back end of the season and the playoffs play out for the Chiefs, and then, of course, on towards the Rugby World Cup of Scotland. Do you get any time off, mate? Your life sounds fairly busy at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've just got the benefit of it, and an incredible wife that has been unbelievable because, it is a lot of time away. And I think you talk to anyone in this industry is that, without our partners and our wives, man, I don't know how we'd do it. So, it's a lot of time away, but at the same time, every day I just, you got to have a tremendous amount of gratitude. If you asked me 10 years ago, you get to do this for a job, I mean, you can barely believe it. So I just feel incredibly fortunate. And, driving over to Hamilton some days from Tauranga, I just can't believe I get to do this for a job and you get to go overseas. So I feel very, very lucky, very, very fortunate, and very thankful that I have an amazing, understanding family that help us navigate through this.
Can you still watch rugby as a fan? Do you still enjoy the game?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, depending on the game, like this morning I was up at 6:30 because I was watching Glasgow play Munster because quite a few of the Scottish players are in Glasgow. So, that was more watching, just getting a feel for things and watching things. But I also love the NRL. That's probably where I'm just a fan.
Yeah.
There's no horse in the race. I just get to sit back and just watch the spectacle where when you got teams involved, you're watching, but there's always an edge around that watching, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, terrific. Aaron, it's always such an enjoyable chat with you, mate. Thanks for taking the time today. All the best for the rest of the season with the Chiefs on towards the Rugby World Cup, mate. Hope to catch up again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Piney. I appreciate the time, mate.
Thank you, mate. That's Aaron Walsh, mental skills coach for the Chiefs and also the Scotland rugby side. An insightful chat as always with Aaron Walsh.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.
Hello, I'm Liam Dan, Business Editor at Large for the New Zealand Herald. and I'm back with another season of my podcast, Money Talks. In this series, we're not going to tell you how to get rich. We're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. Instead, I'll be talking to some interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned about it through the years. Join us every Saturday for a new chat with an exciting range of guests from the world of business, politics and entertainment. You can find Money Talks with me, Liam Dan, wherever you get your podcasts.